Hey, what's going on, YouTube? For the past several days, if you're wondering where I've been, among other things, I've been working on this major project for you guys. I'm hoping to have it produced um, before the weekend. It's going to be a two-part video series, just as my last video series. There's going to be the promotional part here on YouTube, and then the hard-hitting content version, which is going to be on both Black Avenger TV and BitChute. So if you're not liked, shared, and subscribed to me over there on those alternate channels, make sure you do that post haste. Now, I have to warn you, since I've been working on this project, and those of you who have been paying attention, you know what this project is about. I added a little more to it, and it was already over 2.5 hours long when I added audio to it. So when you listen to this, if you're a diehard fan and supporter of my content, be prepared to be there for a while, because I went ham, and I went ham for a long ass time. For those of you who are veterans of supporting and listening to my content, picture the video Letter to Milwaukee that I did about 3 years ago, and you'll get the picture. It's going to be a very lengthy motion picture long video, and it's largely going to be a rant, but there's going to be also a lot of lesson teaching, a lot of logic and common sense, and a lot of warning in there for you brothers. In the meantime, I had to briefly pause that to respond to this tragedy, as I'm sure most of us have heard about, which occurred in my hometown of Chicago, Illinois, yesterday about mid-afternoon. Apparently, what we now know is this SuperSIMP nutcase, identified as Juan Lopez. He confronted a female hospital staff member that was actually a doctor that had just finished her residency back in February, who was identified as Tamara O'Neill, age 38. And Juan Lopez, who is age 32, he, after a brief verbal argument that witnesses say lasted about 1 or 2 minutes, he pulled out a handgun and he opened fire on O'Neill in the parking lot, the staff parking lot of the hospital. And he shot her, she fell, and then he stood over her and pinned her to the ground with some more shots and killed her. He then exchanged gunfire with approaching police officers who happened to hear the gunfire and weren't far away from the Mercy Hospital campus. They rushed into the parking lot, and he fired shots which went through their windshield. Fortunately, those officers weren't hit. They backed their squad, their patrol car up, and they radioed for help. Officer needs assistance. Then Juan Lopez, he pointed a gun at two other women, assumably staff members, because it was a parking lot specifically for hospital staff. He pointed his gun at two other women, unidentified, and they screamed. One of them hid under her car, and then he must have, after panicking them, he panicked, and he ran into the emergency ward through the emergency room doors of the hospital. At that point, people inside the hospital, outside of the hospital, are running, hiding, scrambling for cover. Then this motherfucker just shoots some random white girl that just happened to get off the elevator, ending her shift. She was a pharmacy technician, and her name, I believe, was Dana Less. He killed her. Then several officers now on the scene rushed into the emergency room and engaged the shooter, and one of them, by the name of Samuel Jimenez, he was fatally shot by the suspect as well. Now, in the exchange of gunfire, the suspect, Juan Lopez, was also killed. What is not known is whether police shot and killed him or whether he shot and killed himself. Often in these active shooter cases, the gunman usually commits suicide. So, just in a matter of about 5 minutes, from what I understand, four lives, including three innocent lives, were lost. Now, obviously, I had, with the major burden of this project and some other issues I've been dealing with that I have on my plate, I wouldn't have made a video about this except this morning when I got up to check updates on the story, because Mercy Hospital bears special significance because that's where they saved my father's life when he was in college at ITT Technical Institute, also in Chicago. He had an appendix rupture when he was a college kid, and they rushed him to Mercy Hospital and removed his appendix, saved his life. And this was before he and married my mother and impregnated her with me. So had he have died, um, I wouldn't be here. So Mercy Hospital has special significance to me. But when I checked the updates, turns out I found out that Mr. Juan Lopez, who was a 2014 DePaul University graduate, who worked, apparently he worked with children and people under the poverty line for the Chicago Housing Authority. He was the ex-fiance of this black female in her late 30s, again identified as Tamara O'Neill, and they were scheduled as recently as October to get married. But from what I understand from O'Neill's family, they had just literally broke off their plans to be married, and they kind of separated with each other. So Juan Lopez, and you take a look at this motherfucker. He looks like the typical, I can't live without her simp. If y'all recall that video I made, I forget the name of that guy, where he was talking about, his wife that wanted a divorce, she would have to tell him to his face that she was through, and not before he bought her some roses. That's the type of nigga that this dude is. As a matter of fact, he kind of looks like that dude that was giving that lecture. But it's really no laughing matter. Three people are dead, but whenever I encounter these stories about non-black men killing black women that they've been in relationships with, I have to address this issue because there seems to be this consensus, and it's been growing year by year ever since this swirling epidemic really came out of the closet back in the early 2000 teens, that if you can't find a good black man, forget about Leroy or, Darnell, you know, get with Brad or Greg, and primarily um, these black swirling females or those who choose to date out or completely reject black men, they primarily prefer a white man. But don't, oh, believe me, I've seen it myself. They will more than happily settle for an Asian or a Hispanic or a Jew or even an Arab. I've seen this and I've heard about this on multiple occasions. And over the course of the years that I've been living out on my own, since I was 21 years old and a college kid myself, I've noticed a significant change, even in the city of Chicago, with all of this race mixing garbage. And it is garbage. I don't care. I just had to block and delete some fool on my last video yesterday that was disturbing my comment form, the video that I made about Mylea Connolly, the closet bed wench that's running this Blexit group, claims to have founded the Blexit logo out in Minneapolis. You know, I made it clear, do not come on my comment section with any of that swirling nonsense. If that's what you're about, that's cool. There's plenty of channels, plenty of videos where you can go and you can argue with people, you can show your support, whatever. Brian Solange is not the place. That goes for males and that goes for females. And this happened to be a black male. Keep that, if you're a supporter of mine, just please keep that shit keep that shit to yourself. It gets on my nerves, okay? Now I'm ardently opposed to most black females, but I also understand that this race mixing crap has attributed to the dysfunction and the degradation of the so-called black community, where it's not even a community anymore. But back to what I was saying, not to jump off topic. I've noticed a significant spike in Chicago, especially downtown and North Chicago, of black females openly courting with non-black men, primarily white men. And they seem to have no shame in this, and they seem not to care what anybody thinks. And I've looked at some of these black females, and the thing that struck me particularly odd was not that they were with white men, but that a lot of these chicks look like hood sisters, as y'all would call them. They didn't. Not a lot of them look like the Oreo cookie type black female that would be raised in like a primarily white neighborhood after she was adopted by some white parents or grandparents like Barack Obama. A lot of these black females look like they came from the south side of Chicago and went up north to find them, some white meat, and I don't know for sure, but that's kind of the vibe that I get. I remember walking into a Harold's Chicken, and anybody who's familiar with Chicago knows about Harold's Chicken. It's a pillar of the black community in Chicago and has been for the last 40 years. I walked in there, and it was in North Chicago, but it wasn't the upper north side. It was like down, like just when you get past the downtown area, like up near, just I want to say like just west of the Gold Coast. And I was in there getting some chicken, and this black female just casually walked in there with this white guy, and she's just in places surrounded by these hood rats and thug dudes, and I'm already nervous about that. Then I got to see this nonsense. And so even in Chicago, this swirling epidemic has gotten out of control. And again, these black females who think that they're safe, and they've emboldened themselves to feel safe to do this with these non-black men, to convince themselves that somehow these non-black men are their saviors and the ultimate alternative to black men. A lot of them, as we've gone over time after time, are finding out the hard way that these non-black men, they have mental issues. A lot of them are super simps. A lot of them, some of them, as was seen with this Juan Lopez guy, are willing to get violent, even deadly, if you try to leave them. Now, I don't know, all of the story behind Tamara O'Neal and her ex-fiance who killed her, Juan Lopez. But what I do know from the press clippings is that they were both educated. They were both college graduates. They both seem to have professional careers. And oftentimes what happens with these females, especially these black females, is they get all this education and they want to pursue their careers, but at the same time, they want to honor tradition by having a penis to dangle off of as well. And they find that the penis is more of a burden, getting in the way of what they really want, which is their career. And so they abandon the penis and go back to pursuing their career. And sometimes the penis isn't willing to let go of them, and you have tragic situations like this. Now, again, every time these situations happen with these non-black men, a person will come to me and say, well, how many black men? Because initially, the initial reports was that this guy was the suspect. that witnesses saw was a black guy gunning this this female doctor down in the parking lot. And looking at him, he may be like a Hispanic half breed, but uh, the name says it all. That he's mostly, if not all, Hispanic. I don't know what form of Hispanic. Puerto Rican. I doubt Mexican from the way he looks. I'm thinking probably more like Puerto Rican or Dominican or something. But the fact of the matter is, these so-called educated sisters, they think they're above it all. And, I can guarantee that Tamara O'Neal, she likely, just looking at her, she was born in one of the hoods of Chicago. And I don't have anything against her getting her education and wanting to become a doctor. Lord knows Chicago needs them. But, yeah, I mean, what do the swirlers have to say? Every time one of these non-black guys snaps and welcomes their significant other to the tomahawk, whether they're broken up or still together, what do these swirlers have to say? They're as quiet as a church mouse pissing on cotton, as somebody else said. So yeah, I'm just waiting on a response, see what they have to say. If it was, a straight black guy, I'm sure at least one swirler or so-called pro-black, ahem, ahem, cough, cough, would say something about it. But because it's a non-black guy, or at least a non-full black guy, some freaking Puerto Rican, you probably won't hear a peep. So yeah, it just supports my theory that, it doesn't matter the race of the man. If these women often make poor choices between the thugs and the white trash and the super simps that they get with, and unfortunately, some of them pay the price. But yeah, guys, I just want to share that with you, and now I'm going to get back to what I was doing. Thanks so much, and talk to you later, guys.